Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Welcome to another session of the HQ. If you can tell us where are you tuning in the chat, that'll be great. Just to say hello and to also check out where you guys tuning in. I'm tuning in right from Mexico City. My name is Josue Ibanez. And I'm the host of these sessions. As you know, these sessions are here to connect you with the inner minds and processes of top artists and creators in the immersive media and technology field. Every month, we talk with a creator in their industry live on our YouTube and Twitch channels. And we're super excited, super happy to welcome you guys today. Please let us know where are you guys tuning in so we can say hello on the chat. And today we have a special guest. We're gonna have as guest Onformative, which is a Berlin-based studio that creates meaningful works that challenge the boundaries between art, design, and technology. And what I love about Onformative is that the studio uses new forms and creative expressions, and their outcomes are so different, and vary from across different media fields. And also, like they have been making, from interactive media installations to generative design and the dynamic visuals and data-driven narratives. And we're super excited to be here with you and to welcome Onformative, and also welcome all the people from Vancouver, Dallas, Germany, New Jersey, London, Vancouver, Uganda. Wow, incredible. Thank you so much for all these people tuning in from all over the world. Like we love to do these sessions, and I want to welcome you to Cedric from Onformative. Hello, Cedric. Welcome.
Hi, good to see you. Thanks for
Good to
having
see
me.
you. Yeah. It's always a pleasure. I've been admiring your work since the beginning and since the early stages of
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we know each
generative
other for
design.
quite a while, right? We already met in Mexico at Off, that you have been kind of like organizing back then, and since then we have been in contact. So I'm super happy that I finally have the chance to be part of this exciting format.
Yeah, well, somehow we lose contact, and then like we're working on the program, and it's incredible how we like we always been in touch since a long time. But I wanted to invite you as a guest for this session because like I really think that the type of work that you guys do at Informative, it's quite special, and it has some kind of a uniqueness in their visual approach, but also their
Thank
content.
you.
So with no more further introduction, I'm gonna first let you speak, Cedric, and then I'm going to ask you some questions. And of course, for all the people that are tuning in here, you can prepare your questions about the studio, but I'm going to give you all the word to you. I don't know if you wanna go ahead, please.
Yeah, wonderful. Perfect. I have a little presentation prepared so I can maybe share a little bit of our work with you guys. And what I want to talk about today is actually the idea of, I'm wondering, can you guys see my screen? Can you?
Not yet. Can you just?
Okay, share it, right? So good that we
Right.
checked that. Otherwise, I would have started preparing and presenting. One second.
Don't worry. Just pull it in, and then Mexico, Brazil, Copenhagen, Shanghai,
Okay, here we go.
Zurich. Here we go. Yeah.
Wonderful. Because what I want to talk a little bit about today is, of course, our work, our approach, and our studio. But also something that we have been thinking about for quite a while. And this is the general idea of creativity and inspiration and what this means today in the age of co-creation and AI and all this technology. And yeah, before I go a little bit into detail, I do a little introduction, although you already introduced us quite well. But yeah, Onformative is a small design studio based in Berlin, founded 2010 by Julia Laub, my colleague, and myself. And over the last 15 years, we grew to a team of multidisciplinary designers, artists, creatives, developers. And this is our small studio where all the magic happens, where we do all of our projects. And as you already said, the range of projects we do is quite diverse. So it ranges from large-scale media installations like this one we did in Shanghai that is happening on the outside and of the inside of a building, or we create these screen-based installations for lobbies, such as the data sculpture for the IoT center of IBM in the Munich headquarters. But we also work on smaller self-initiated projects, experiences, where we try new technologies, where we also try to expand our skill set. For example, the moment we start working on kinetic art pieces, something that we usually have no experience with, but these self-initiated research projects always help us to kind of like push the boundaries of what we are capable of doing and our imagination. And it often comes down to kind of like finding the right visual metaphor or way of expressing an idea. And this often happens on screens. So we develop these digital contents, and we do these again on these large scale media screens. But we also do this for commercial clients that we work with on a much smaller scale in terms of screen space, but probably also a much larger scale in terms of audience, because one of our long-term clients and partners is Samsung. And together with Samsung, we have been developing exclusively all the ambient artworks that are running on their screens. Over the past 7 years, we have been developing over 50 different contents that show a lot of different visuals, from really concrete to really abstract. And all of these visuals are often interactive or either data-driven, such as this one, taking, let's say, wind data into account from the location of the screen position. And this is something where we apply our kind of like knowledge in quite commercial projects that, at least for us, still have a high creative freedom and an artistic touch to it. And especially with Samsung, we have been working on a lot of different devices, but then also did the same for partners from the mobile field. But in the end, as you already said, it's a quite diverse range that ranges from interactive media installations, these spatial experiences, to digital art content of all kinds. But then also, again, these data-driven narratives, how we like to call them, where we use data to drive a story. But then we also do the same thing for creative brands and consult them on how to use, let's say, generative design in their branding. But then we also do a lot of technological research in different fields, either for companies who have some tech on their own that they want to be explored, or we also work closely with their developers to think about how to apply them in different situations. In the end, all of this happens somewhere at the intersection of art, design, and technology. So it's always happening between those individual fields. If you want to find out a little bit more and dig a little bit deeper, there's an interesting kind of like expertise section on our website where we talk about these individual fields and that we are active in. But if I would have to kind of like say it in one simple sentence, I would probably say that, inspired by the world surrounding us, we create digital art or digital content with an emotional touch. So although technology is an important part of all of our projects, we do not try to make the technology itself the topic, but it usually is either inspired by, again, nature, the human, or any other topic that we are relating to. And it has a little bit to do also with our origin and where we're coming from. So looking 15 years back, one of the starting points of the studio, one of the starting points of Onformative was the release of the generative design book that my colleague Julia published. And this book is all about kind of like using generative design, using code, using technology to design. And this has been, really the core of what we have been doing in the very beginning at Onformative. We have been working on these generative art, generative design, creative coding projects. And during the first 2 years, 3 years of our studio, we have been thinking a lot about what projects to work on and where to apply our kind of like skills. And obviously, if you're a creative studio and just started, you don't have a lot of clients and you don't have a big name, and it takes a while until kind of like people recognize you and you start to wonder what to work on in the meantime, because you have a lot of free time, obviously. And during this time, we often thought about where we get ideas from and where we get inspired from. Like, what is the initial spark that kind of like creates an idea? And it's something that I also have been thinking a lot about lately, wondering like where do ideas come from, and what does inspire me, and what does inspire creatives in general? And I try to answer this question for us, for myself, and we realized that in the end, technology and using technology as a tool for creative expression is also a great source of inspiration for us. So it has always been helpful for us to kind of like work with technology as a tool in one way or another. And through this, we always got inspired in some kind of way. And I want to show some examples throughout our career, and start really early with one of the very first projects that we have been working on, exactly during these times where we had a lot of free time to work on. And it was a project called Unnamed Sound Sculpture. So this is like 12 years old by now. But it was one of the very first projects where motion sensors and motion tracking has been used to visualize body motion. From today's perspective, this is actually pretty common, because all you need to do is kind of like record motion data with your iPhone, or not even that, and get some motion tracking data and you visualize it in Houdini. But back then, the question was really like, how do you do this technically? And it was through a collaboration with a dancer and performer that we really got interested in recording her creative expression. Like, she was performing and dancing to a music piece that she was listening to, and spontaneously expressed herself in her motion. And we tried to actually figure out how can we record her motion. And that was, again, back then in 2012, when the Kinect was released and there were no drivers available to actually record these data sets. So we tried to write our own software, try to write own software that could port the data that we recorded to enable us to import it into Cinema 4D. And through these kind of like processes, we also somehow defined a visual style, and we very much enjoyed this kind of like open, explorative way of finding new visual expressions. And this approach has been part of our journey since then. And I want to share one learning that we got from this time, that opening up the room for improvisation and also looking a little bit for this serendipity and chance in your working progress might create really inspiring and exciting moments in your work. And there's another project, if I jump forward a few years, 2016, where we got approached by Dolby Laboratories from San Francisco, and they have this beautiful headquarter in Main Street, and they have this gallery screen, and they actually invited us to create an art piece, a digital art piece for the lobby of their headquarter. And they saw the Unnamed Sound Sculpture piece that we created back then, and they wanted something similar, or they asked us if we would be up for creating something similar. And usually if we get asked to do something similar, we try to give it a different spin or do it a little bit differently or look at it from a different perspective. And if you remember this sound sculpture piece, it was only about the body. But in this case, we wanted to kind of look at it a little bit differently, and instead look at the space and the energy and how it fills the space. So what we did again was starting a research phase where we analyzed motion data from different performers and really recorded how the energy is kind of like spreading into the room while they perform. And there was one interesting moment when we talked about or talked to these performers about their performance. And there was one thing that they told us, and it was the fact that they said when they start to perform and listen to the music and just move and dance, they sometimes get lost in the performance, in the process. So everything somehow starts to fade out, and they are really focused. And we really love this idea of being in the zone, being completely focused in what you do, because this is when creativity happens. So what we actually did was we thought about the idea of interpreting these screens as a window into this abstract world where you completely get lost in your performance. And by using these recorded motion data, we were able to create these abstract visuals that somehow show a split second of a body, how it comes close to the screen, but then also quickly disappears again. So by recording this data and turning it into these abstract visuals, we transported the story of this kind of like performance. And at the same time, we were also tasked to create a sound piece for this, because it's Dolby. They are big in sound and speakers. And they also asked us to create a soundscape on top of these visuals. And of course, usually what you do is you have a visual, you can like work with a sound designer, you hand them the visuals, and they create some sound score on top of it. But for us, especially for this piece, it was really important to stay close to the original idea and the concept of being lost and being immersed in the experience and in the creative process. So we thought about maybe we can use the same principle, the same idea also for the music creation. So what we did here was teaming up with a sound design studio from Berlin, Kling Klang Klong, and cello players, and we brought them into this virtual world. So we had 3 cello players immersed in this world, and they were spontaneously improvising what they saw in front of their eyes. And they were positioned in different spaces, and for this reason, they were also reacting differently to the music. And this allowed us to create a really unique and really special kind of like soundscape that just happened spontaneously. And obviously, this is not the easiest and most obvious way to create music, but it is a new way that potentially leads to new outcomes. And this is what we love exploring with these projects. And I know you can't listen to the music here because it's not streamed, so I can only invite you to kind of check out the project on the website, so you also get to experience the sound.
Incredible.
So
That's amazing.
yeah, thank you. So one thing that we learned from this project is that sometimes you have to kind of like change your perspective. You need to put yourself in a different space, in a different situation to become creative, to do something a little bit different than you would usually do it. And this idea of changing perspective is actually also the topic of one of our other projects, which is called Meandering River. And the project started after kind of like stumbling across the satellite images for another project of rivers all over the world. And it's really incredible. And I didn't know it back then, or I never really thought about it, but these rivers really move through the landscape. They move through the landscape in a way that you can't see it because it's so slow. But if you look at satellite images over the course of 20, 30, 40 years, you can really see how they meander through the landscape and change the course of the river and water flow. And the moment we see something like this that excites us, we want to understand how it's really working. We want to kind of like understand it and recreate it. So we start with kind of like recreating this in code, try to simulate the same behavior. And this is our kind of like code simulation of a similar river meandering behavior. And the moment we had this figured out, we wondered, okay, what is the visual aesthetic that we're aiming for? Like, this is not the look that we wanted. But we also kind of like looked at other satellite images that we found during our research. And if you look at these, they already have a really painterly and beautiful aesthetic. So what we did as a next step was developing the shader code and real-time application further to recreate these different aesthetics, these different imaginary kind of like landscapes of different places on Earth, and created this real-time artwork that we first exhibited at Funkhaus Berlin as part of a real-time visual, constantly running, constantly changing. And that's the beauty about this piece, that it's unpredictable. You really don't know what's happening next. And this piece again comes with a beautiful sound score. And I also want to quickly talk about the sound score, although I know you can't hear it. But what we intended for this piece was having a sound score that is heavily inspired by piano music. So something that really feels natural. But how do you create a soundscape for a piece that is unpredictable, that is always changing? And this was 2018, or when we kind of like worked on this, it was actually 2017. And that's when we first thought about maybe using AI as a co-creator, using AI in the creative process. And if you think about that piece, and we just thought about, or we just talked about changing perspectives, then looking also maybe at the perspective of a machine and the human is quite interesting, because what you see here at the top is what the human sees. The human sees the river moving through the landscape, while the machine only sees numbers. The machine knows the length of the river and the position of the river, but it doesn't know anything about aesthetics. So what we did here was we teamed up again with the Klonks from Berlin, and we started recording sessions of piano play. So we had a lot of piano players invited to interpret the visuals in a way that a human would interpret them. So they looked at all the different aesthetics and interpreted them in different ways. And by doing this, we collected a large set of MIDI data as a training set. So we used Google Magenta, which is a machine learning for music creation, to create these MIDI compositions. And then through training, we ended up with these kind of like, large collections of different music compositions that we used as a starting point for our own composition. And I think this is a really interesting workflow when you talk about kind of like co-creation, because it's not you typing in a prompt and the output that you get is your final artwork, but you have this kind of like feedback where you put something in, you teach the machine how to interpret certain things on your own behavior, and then you get something back in reverse, and it starts this kind of like creative exchange between you and the machine. And I think that's super exciting. And again, I can only invite you to kind of like look at the full documentary, especially including the sound, on the website. But the next thing that happened for us that was really important was thinking about, okay, if the AI is becoming like the co-creator, like what does it mean for me as the human? When the AI starts creating content, what's my role in the creative process? And that's when we started to think about the human becoming more of a curator in that process. And that was 2018, early 2019, when we started another research project about AI and co-creation. Again, starting with an inspiration of these old masters working in their workshops on sculptures, because back then it was also a lot about kind of like co-creation. If you think about all these grand masters, they never really kind of like sculpted every sculpture on their own. They had a big team of individuals working for them, and then they just made a selection of which sculpture they liked the most, and then they continued. And there's a lot of studies and unfinished kind of like designs. And this is an idea that we liked very much, because there's still this creative ownership, even though you didn't touch everything yourself in the end. And another thing that we very much liked about this idea of sculpting is that in the creative process, the process itself leaves a mark. Every tool that you're using leaves a mark. In this specific case, you see the scratches of the tools that you have been using. And we really wanted to kind of like transport this idea, or these two ideas, into the present, using AI as technology and as creative partner here again. And we started by really simply rebuilding this sculpting process on a pixel basis. So what you see here is the AI agent, the red pixel sculpting from a 2D block, just removing pixels. And we did this training through reinforcement learning, teaching the AI how to efficiently sculpt by rewarding and punishing it. So if you delete too many pixels, you get punished. If you are moving really efficiently, you get rewarded. And interestingly, by these simple rules, the AI already learned some methods how to move efficiently. In this example, it is mostly moving diagonal, because it realized if I move diagonal, I'm much more efficient. And this already led to the behavior being visible in the end result on a really simple 2D level. So we moved on, developed this process further, using Unity as the training platform, and Houdini as the visualization platform, and also looked at the whole AI process from a different perspective, again, through the eye of the machine. So this is kind of like the track of the AI and the confidence, and also the rewards and the punishment visualized in the block. So by looking at these things differently, you also again establish new aesthetics. And yeah, we continue this exploration, moving on, sculpting a large series of 3D sculptures. So endless training sessions, refinements, multiple agents training on multiple sculptures with different rule sets. But at one point, we got to the point where we got some really beautiful results that we didn't really expect, because the machine slowly started to learn to sculpt efficiently and end up with these kind of like human-like figures that are by far not perfect. But what we loved about them is that you still see the usage of the tool, the pathway of the agent, how it moved through this material. And in the end, we ended up with a larger selection of sculptures. And this was the moment when we were in the position to kind of like decide which are the ones that we would like to exhibit, but also answering the question how we would like to exhibit. Do we want to kind of like CNC mill them and show them in the real world as 3D prints, or do we want to kind of like show them in a virtual gallery setup? And we decided to create this virtual gallery setup and space that we could also use to, in the end, tell the story, not only show the final pieces, but actually tell the story of the creation process. So again, on the website, there's a longer video that, takes you on a journey and shows you the story of this one block being kind of sculpted through this AI process of the agent learning how to, remove material from a virtual block. And for us, these projects are always super interesting, because when we start the research or start with an idea, the outcome is not clearly defined. When we started this, we didn't know from the beginning that this is going to be an animation or a movie or a film. Sometimes we don't even have an end result itself, but it's more like the showcase or the case that we explain, that is the project itself. I mean, for this specific piece, we also had a scientific paper released on the website that explains the process and how we did it. So for us, it's really much about the process itself and how we document it and how we share it. And after we kind of like finished this project, we also wondered, like, okay, where do we go from here? Like, what is the next step? And we released this project. I mean, although we finished in 2021, we released this early 2022. And this was still before the AI hype. And of course, everything moved faster and faster, and generative AIs came in, and all these large language models kind of like, and everybody was wondering, okay, what's coming next? And how is this kind of like changing our work as creatives? And we started to also thinking about that, like, what does it mean for the creative process? How do we maybe need to rethink the creative process? How can we use technology to support us in our creative process instead of replacing it? And during this time, we have been working on 2 projects with creators from completely different disciplines. We have been working on a project with some fashion designers and some people working at Nike, and they shared some background about their working progress and how they usually work with different materials and how they work sculpting objects like shoes in a really rough manner, and then kind of like just using different materials to test how it would actually feel and look like. And at the same time, we also had another project with a company, or with BMW in this specific case, working in the fields of car design. And also there, we talked to some designers that told us a little bit more about their design process. Especially in car design, you have this kind of like piece of clay, or you sketch really rough lines on paper, and then you start to kind of like see something in this abstract piece of clay that inspires you, and then you can like dig a little bit deeper, you start to refine it, you get more details, And that's how you get from a simple idea to something much more concrete. And it's this moment when you see something in this abstract object that inspires you. And we wondered if we can actually create a process, create maybe some fictional tools that support this kind of like creative journey, this kind of like looking for interesting perspectives. And we started pretty similar. We had this idea of having this abstract shape and maybe even a generative procedural setup in the background that regenerates different type of basic shapes. But then at one point, maybe you like a shape and then you start to kind of like look at the shape from different perspectives. You start to rotate it, you move it around, you maybe also zoom in and look at it really closely. And maybe at one point, it stays in position and you feel like, oh, this is a really nice shot. This is something that I really like. And maybe you see something, maybe this reminds you of, maybe a new car shape. Maybe it reminds you of a kind of like new furniture or anything else. And what it reminds you of also often depends on your background, what you have been taught, what you have been seeing before, your cultural background and your interest. But we wondered maybe in this process of interpretation, we can also bring the machine in and maybe ask the machine what it sees in this and ask the machine how it would interpret such an abstract shape. And maybe together with an AI, we can go on this kind of like explorative journey where we can like move around objects and ask the machine what it sees. And we took this idea a little bit further and developed this kind of like speculative tool where, you can generate different base shapes and then kind of like through some prompts can kind of like get inspired by asking the AI what it sees in these abstract shapes and then also start actually collecting these. And maybe we wondered, is this a new, more explorative, open approach of maybe inspiration collection? So instead of just kind of like randomly browsing Pinterest or Instagram, maybe it's really this way of kind of like generating creative input. And the main idea here is not to have the machine or the AI generate or create the final piece, but just maybe create some input for you to take further. Maybe this image is just going to end up as one inspiration on your mood board. And from there, you just continue with a classical, typical design process. And of course, again, this could be adapted to different domains from, again, sport and fashion, generating different type of outputs, but then also much more specific, in this case, automotive. And this is for us a really interesting and helpful process because we are learning so much by sharing these things with our clients, sharing it at conferences, but then also sharing it in situations like this where we present our work and then we can have a conversation about it and together discuss what this whole change and progress means for us as designers. So thank you very much for taking the time and listening to me. And I'm very much looking forward for having a conversation about exactly this. Thank you, guys.
Oh my God! Like so much to process in the brain, right? So before we continue with the second part of this session, talking about some questions, I'm just gonna take just one briefly moment to talk about the HQ. Then we jump a little bit more into the questions. So for those who doesn't know, like the Interactive and Immersive HQ Pro is the only school for immersive designers, creative technologies, and touch designer artists and developers. We have over 60 full touch designer courses and creative technology content. We also have a private group where we have coaches and they can solve you some of your questions with some specific things that you have in mind. And also, we hold some live accelerative sessions, which are some individual coaching sessions for students. We have over 120 custom built touch designer tools, project files, and templates, and we also have a certificate program. So now that we have this brief, let's just keep exploding our mind with Onformative. And as I was sharing at the beginning of the call, like. I think you guys are pioneers in the generative design field, because one of the things that I like a lot about your work is that you also, you know, like make a living out of making this type of stuff,
Try.
right?
I do my best.
But it's interesting about how these projects that are not client based derive into so much learning and so much, you know, like
Mm.
incredible finance. And I think from the perspective of these calls that we've been doing with the studios, like the core situation where you have to create your own projects are so much valuable for a studio. And you know, like you cannot pretend that you're going to do a studio without creating self-initiated projects, because those are the ones that drives a lot of the innovation within the studio. And I would like to ask you about how is your design process in the studio for creating such incredible digital artwork.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a really important point, like the importance of creating such projects. But of course, I also want to kind of like be quite open that of course it's not only these self-initiated art projects that we worked on. I picked some specific ones because it's exactly what we have been doing over the years. But of course, we also work on a lot of kind of like client projects. But we realized throughout the years that through our projects that we share and also the process that we share, the clients that we get admire this approach and they are completely open for this. And of course, we know about the demand of a commercial project, but we try to apply the same thinking, the same process in these projects as well. And as you said, how to do this is something that we learn through these self-initiated projects. I mean, every time there is a new technology, and yeah, you need to kind of like look at it from scratch and see how you can apply it. It has been the case for the very first kind of like time we used code for design. It was the very first time we used new technologies like the Kinect. Like each time we get our hands on something new, there isn't a blueprint how to use these. And for us, this is also something that we're still applying in today's projects, like this kind of like openness in applying new technologies in your everyday work. And at one point you develop a strategy and a feeling for how to use technology in a creative way and also in a predictable way. Because of course, always when you work on commercial projects with a tight deadline, this could also be risky, because if you haven't done it before, you're missing experience. But what I believe we gained throughout the years is the experience to being able to adapt to the unknown. So if something hasn't been done before or hasn't been done exactly in this way, we kind of like build strategies to kind of like get these things done anyway. And I think this is what we usually learned or got better in by developing these self-initiated projects.
Yeah, so one of the other interesting things about the studio approach is like they don't rely into one single technology, right? Whatever is Touch Designer or VVV or whatever is the process. What is one of the most important parts in the studio, from what I can tell from your work, and you know, like the ability that gave us this new technologies, it's quite relevant right now for the type of work and where this type of work it goes. And regarding to the AI, I want to ask you, like, what is your vision for AI and art for the short term and long term?
I mean, you mentioned one important aspect, and that's the fact that we are not focused on a specific kind of like media, and that's true. And in the very beginning, when we founded the studio, we were wondering, like, what do we really do as a studio? How do we present ourselves? How do we tell clients about what we do? Because usually you say, yeah, we do installations, we do only animations. But for us, it doesn't really matter exactly, because as you said, it's the approach. It's always this kind of like open approach that is kind of like the same, that is part of every project. And through this project, we always include technology. And in that sense, AI is also just another technology that we are including and using, although it's probably the most impactful and most powerful one that we have been using and that we are facing. obviously also because AI is a term that covers so many different individual technologies. But our vision, kind of like long term, yeah, I mean, there is definitely already right now the separation between the AI tools that almost become kind of like standard tools in our process, from kind of like upscaling and enhancing and interpolating and content aware or generative fill and all these things. It's like a regular tool that we're using on a daily basis. And then within that AI realm, there are also still new technologies and new, let's say, workflows being developed on a daily basis that still need to be explored, that maybe we don't even know how to apply them. And it's also amazing to see the pace of this innovation. Like I mean, again, starting like when I think back like 15 years from now, when we started with this generative design and creative coding, it was a really small community of kind of like a few people doing processing or open frameworks and coding. And you had, I don't know, you had a few months to develop something. You had half a year or a year to kind of like develop a project. And right now I feel like, okay, you have an idea, but then like a week later, either the technology is already outdated or somebody did it. And this pace is amazing. And you kind of like, you need to adapt to this. And I think this is exactly what it's about. Try to see where these kind of like AI tools become just a regular tool within your workflow, and where is still room for exploration and how you apply these things in your projects.
It's incredible, and you know, like not everything is it's an easy path to walk in, right? So there is also struggles and problems through owning a studio and trying to, you know, create these incredible visuals, because you know I cannot imagine this meeting where you're trying to sell these abstract beautiful landscapes to a client, right? It's
I mean, that's another interesting thing that we learned. We had this idea and we tried to sell it to a lot of clients or a lot of kind of like sponsors or partners before we did it, and nobody really liked it or understood it. And then we just kind of like did it on our own. We financed it. We showed it at Funkhaus the first time. And then people from all over the world saw it and they wanted to kind of like exhibit and show it and put it in galleries. And that has been the case for quite a while. And we realized if you want to put some ideas out in the world, you need to kind of like do it. You need to show it and share it. And that's when people start to understand it and ask for it. We had the same with our AI sculpting project. We had different partners and clients that we tried to sell this idea, but nobody really kind of like got interested or maybe understood it. And after we did it, again, we got approached by different kind of like people to kind of like work on something similar. So for us, this has also been a big part of our kind of like learning experience and also strategy to get new clients and work with new people.
one of the learnings that we've been getting through all of these calls with people in the industry is like this kind of a consistent element that has every studio, which is a research lab or something where they can just, you know, do projects that nobody, you know, is paying for those projects. And you know, some of those will be probably the most known projects from your studio someday, right? And I wanted to ask you, in this type of, you know, like process and learning through your career, is like, if you can travel back in time, what advice would you give to a younger self, you know, like enter into this industry? And a lot of people are here just entering.
You know what? Maybe if I would travel back in time and talk to my younger self, I would not talk too much about what it really means to kind of like run a studio. Because if I would have known what I signed up for, I probably wouldn't have done it. I think for me, it was always this kind of like excitement and the urge to kind of like see what's coming next. If I would have known what, I mean, it's quite challenging to be honest, to kind of like stay up to date, to always push yourself, to run a studio with a focus on also these projects, because this obviously means making money is not your main kind of like focus, at least not with every project. and of course that still kind of like comes with some challenges. So I wouldn't have told myself about kind of like every detail what it means to run a studio, because I think it's exactly this, and I think it's also what excites me right now. I really want to know what happens next. I want to know what the future holds, and how technology evolves. So I think this little bit of unknown and excitement is what kind of like drives me and keeps me going and pushes me. So maybe not knowing everything is the best in this case.
Not knowing everything, yeah, that's a good one. And is it the same advice that you will give to this audience that is entering into this field?
I mean, in that sense, it's kind of like being excited and being open for kind of like new things. I know it's challenging. I mean, I also kind of like teach students. I talk to a lot of kind of like younger designers, and they really kind of like also ask me about how I feel about AI technology, and I always try to kind of like give them an honest answer, but I also don't really know, because at one point I'm super excited what kind of like comes, and super surprised by the fast pace and the quality of all these AI tools and how this will change our kind of like workflow. But at the same time, it also is a little bit scary, to be honest, because a lot of things that we have been doing like 2 years ago are already obsolete, and I don't have a clear answer to what this will mean to designers. If you study design today, the industry will probably look much different in 4 years when you're done with studying. So what I also try to do myself to kind of like being up to date and open is just kind of like try to kind of like absorb everything that's currently happening. I read a lot about all these AI technologies. I try to kind of like really understand what's going on, how it can influence your work, but then at the same time also try to completely disconnect from this, because it's not, when we talk about creativity, and that's exactly also what my talk is about. When we talk about creativity and design and inspiration, there's also a huge world that doesn't need any technology at all, or that's completely disconnected from AI. So this is not the all-defining topic. But yeah, what am I kind of like what would I give as an advice? Being open, being kind of like yeah, being yeah, excited to kind of like explore and test out things. For me, this has always been the main kind of like driving force and inspiration. And again, sharing, collaborating, and working with other people. In all of our projects, we try to kind of like work with people from different disciplines, no matter if it's kind of like dancers, performers, musicians, um, fashion designers. For me, this was always the most inspiring, trying to kind of like break out of my technology-driven bubble. Because the moment you leave this bubble, you see there's a whole world of creativity out there that that is there to explore for you. And the interesting part is that all these things are getting much closer together. And that's the beauty about this approach, that you can collaborate with all of these people because you're defining the interfaces, you're developing the interfaces in which you can collaborate. And that's again through technology. And being open for this kind of like collaboration and exploration is probably the thing that I can only recommend.
I want to hold on a minute into this collaboration part because recently I've seen a lot of magic happening with just people that are randomly writing messages through Instagram to people that they admire their work, and they just say like, oh, I will be, it will be really excited for me to work with you. I'm happy to collaborate. And I've seen like a work that have been amazing just by approaching to people. And sometimes we're kind of like afraid to approach people because oh, they're so professional and I'm just beginning, and you'll be surprised, like and what's the worst thing that could happen to you, like if they say no, right?
Exactly.
So I'm going to jump into some questions from the audience that is tuning in around here. So for example, like we have some question from Grit here, like how to stay up to date in this fast piece field?
So, yeah, good question. I mean, I made the experience, obviously, that these things are moving so fast. I do not only teach, I also give workshops or let's say talks at clients where I also educate them a little bit about kind of like AI technology. And I've been giving talks sometimes only a few weeks apart, and I had to completely update them because there was a new software coming out, there was a new approach coming out, there was a new, I don't know. I mean, if you just look at these image generators or video generators, like, oh, 1 week everybody is praising Zora, and then another startup from China creates another one, and then there's Runway coming up again, and it's kind of like this constant flow of information. I try to filter it through different channels. I have a pretty good feed, and I just try to kind of like at least look at every information. But sometimes it's also a little bit of an information overflow, and I'm wondering how long I can actually keep up with all of this. But I think that's kind of like part of being a creative, trying to see what other people do, trying to see what's out there. But staying up to date in this fast-paced field is definitely not easy. If you're trying to kind of like step out for only a few weeks, the landscape changed dramatically, and yeah, I don't know. At this point, I still try to kind of like consume everything. I have a channel where I can like forward everything that I want to kind of like read later, and I maybe only read like 5%. But at least I know where it is in case I need it.
Yeah, so it's a really a tough question, right? But I can also share that one of the strategies could be also to come up with an artistic project or whatever, research project.
Absolutely,
That
absolutely. I mean,
that's
reading about it is one thing, but then also, of course, applying it is a completely different one. And yeah, picking some things that interest you, and maybe combine them even with some topics that you are excited about, could already make a perfect case for you to test out one of these technologies. And of course, you can only learn them if you start applying them.
Yeah, because I mean, you can learn all of your life if you want, right? But I think you need to apply what you learn at some point, and through art, the way you guys do it is a very like interesting things, because you guys were learning so much about
Mm.
AI behavior through all of this sculpturing that you were creating, and that happened because you
I
had
mean,
something to apply.
one interesting thought, and there's another question that I just see popping up here. How do you approach the distribution of skills and knowledge in the team? Because if you think about it, because you just said, yeah, knowing about all of this and applying all of this, at this point, I lost, how to say, I'm not even able to apply all of this or even a fraction of it, because I'm also so much into kind of like running a studio and developing projects on a creative level and managing projects, that I don't even have the time to kind of like apply all of these technologies. But for me to kind of like still being part of this, I try to at least understand how they work, so I can kind of like talk about it. I can think about them. I can make sure that they are part of my creative ideas. But in the end, it's somebody else from the team who needs to kind of like really look into it and apply them, because sometimes it really takes days or weeks or even months to kind of like master these technologies. And that's sometimes when I get a little bit jealous, because I would also love to have the time to kind of like really dig a little bit deeper, but I know it's not possible for me. So I try to kind of like really understand it on the broad level, and get a good overview. And I think that's my skill set at this point. But then it's up to the team, and building these skill sets within the team when it comes to applying technology. And yeah, that's why it's important to have a strong and powerful team with a lot of different interests and expertise.
There is a question from Sonia related to. It will be great to hear some examples of the strategies you mentioned for re-getting projects over the line with experimental text for commercial projects.
That's one of the biggest challenges, to be honest. Like getting these self-initiated and research projects over the finish line. because if you, I mean, research projects per definition are open-ended. Like, is the research ever done? I don't know. And I have to admit that we are definitely struggling, or I personally struggle with kind of like calling a project done, because there's always something else I would like to look into, or something that I would like to kind of like explore or apply. And at the same time, each one of us who works creatively also knows that you are your worst kind of like client, because you're never really satisfied and happy. So we we often force ourselves to kind of like finish projects by defining some kind of like deadlines. And we also realized, if you put like an imaginary deadline in the calendar, like, okay, we need to finish this by end of August. If there's no really kind of like reason to finish it, you always find an excuse to kind of like push it a little bit further. So we often try to set some kind of like deadlines that come with, let's say, an exhibition date or a release that we do together with a partner. So there is a little bit of pressure. But I have to be honest, we could be better with this. But of course, these kind of like projects are also have this kind of like creative freedom and this openness with is part of the fun. So it's finding the balance, not getting lost in these projects, and keep pushing them forever. Because I mean, the AI project, the AI sculpting project, is a pretty good example. The first idea for this project, I believe, was from 2017, 2018. So pretty early. And then we didn't work on it for a year or two. And then we started really, simple, doing these kind of like pixel explorations. And then another year passed. And in 2019 or beginning 2020, during Corona, we thought, okay, now we do it. Now we push it. And we finished it early. I don't know. We released it 2022. And that was actually at the peak of kind of like AI hype, or when kind of like ChatGPT was released and everybody was talking about it. But if we would have waited just another kind of like half year or year, it maybe would have been already kind of like too late. So sometimes it's good to kind of like be really early with these ideas, but we definitely also need to get better with kind of like getting these products over the finish line. It's something different with commercial projects. So we know pretty well, and we're good at kind of like developing these projects in a really tight deadline and being really focused. But we need to kind of like get better, maybe applying the same principle to our own projects.
Amazing. So from Sasha, it's asking like, who's your famous inspiring artist for now?
Yeah, I've been asked this question a few times, and I never really kind of like had an answer, because there's not this kind of like one idol, or this kind of like one role model, or kind of like inspiring artist. I've been much more inspired by kind of like working with, again, all these kind of like creative people from completely different disciplines. Not a famous artist, but like ordinary creatives like you and me. And for me, that's much more interesting, because I can learn something from their process that, even if I would copy it, would lead to something completely different. So I mean, often when you talk about, I admire this artist from the same field, and because you want to kind of like create something similar and kind of like copy and recreate. But for me, it's really more the approaches to creativity that other people bring to the table that inspires me. And usually that comes from, all these kind of like people that I met in the from the creative community, but not kind of like some detached superstars.
Okay, so I'm gonna wrap those two last questions because I want to be respectful with your time. And this has to be with teams. So the first question from Gabriela is like, is there an internship position currently available? I knew that people were going to happen that, because I also want to do an internship at Onformative at some point. But there is this question from Isaiah about how do you put together the team at Onformative?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's also something that we've felt is kind of like changing in recent years. I mean, I don't know how it is for you guys, but we are experiencing some change in the industry and in the demands from the clients and how projects are done. And that's really interesting, and this is also why we're kind of like questioning our team structure and how we are like working as a studio in general. Like we used to have a core team of 3D artists and creatives, developers, and we also realized the more specialized and focused they were on specific technology, also the less flexible we got at a point. Because I mean, through the project that I shared, and you also mentioned it, we're working on a lot of different projects. We're working on these installations, we're working on animations. We also work on a lot of kind of like research projects for companies like Samsung and Nike and Google that we can't share. And for each of these projects, we usually need different people. And we felt like we might need a different kind of flexibility that comes more from working with a smaller core team, but then having a broader network of creatives and artists and developers to work with. So we're kind of like thinking about restructuring in a way to open up for kind of like getting other people on board on a project basis. But then, of course, this also changes the requirements for the core team. So for the core team, it usually means you need to be cross-disciplinary. You need to be able to combine design and code, or think about, across disciplines, because we don't have this kind of like classical structure where there's a developer, there's a designer, there's a creative director, and then there's a project manager. The project manager manages the communication between all of these parties and then kind of like communicates it to the client. It's a much more collaborative way of working, a much more fluent way of working, where everybody is talking to everybody, and the roles are kind of like fading or kind of like mixing much more. So it's also really hard to kind of like look at or give a recommendation what to learn or what to study, because it really depends. Like we have people working for us who didn't study or learn anything at all. They just kind of like started exploring and coding and had this kind of like open mind to kind of like approach things. And sometimes that's much more valuable than studying design for, I don't know, 5 years. So I'm not sure if this really answered the question, but we are in the process of rethinking what a creative team needs and how a creative team looks like. But we haven't fully answered it, but we see it changing at the moment.
Cedric, thank you so much for your time and for sharing this session. It's been a very inspiring session, as people is mentioning on the chat. And thank you for tuning in today and for sharing with all of us your thoughts and your process. And thank you for all the people who are tuning in. Cedric.
Yeah, thank you very much. Hope to see you soon. And thanks for joining.
Hope to see you soon, and thank you guys. We'll see you next month, and thank you so much for tuning in. And bye bye. See you.
Bye.